What up, everybody?
What up?
Welcome to another episode of Behind the Door podcast with your good friends and your boys, Jeremy Hiltz and Brandon Brown. We're going to talk about some things today. I think just kind of address some of the feedback we got recently and have a constructive conversation around the reality that we have a president who's a felon and what it all means. And I'll just kind of kick off the conversation to you, Jeremy, about, we posted this episode basically saying, we've got a felon president, which means like we got to see some reforms for our community, because if you can occupy the highest, most powerful seat in the world, then you should also be able to coach your kid's basketball team and get a job and find housing and vote. Specifically and especially, you should be able to vote for president if you can be the president as a felon. And we've gotten some kind of interesting feedback, and I think the majority of the feedback we've gotten that was critical is that there's a healthy population of people that believe that Trump's charges are fake and that they were a ploy, a kind of political ploy to get him to stop running for president. From my perspective, the reality is whether or not they were fake, we know two things: that ploy didn't work, if you believe the ploy, that he was convicted and able to become president. And secondly, that our system is broken, right? It's designed to give advantage to people with money and resources and to punish people for being poor, because all of our poor people who have felony convictions are unable to do many things that our, rich and wealthy counterparts are not. But I'm interested from your perspective, what are some of your takes on the feedback that we received about, this whole fake charges, but still being convicted and still being able to become president? What does it all mean, even if that's true?
Well, first, I am not a political person.
Yes, me either.
I don't. We were up recently at the in Augusta with the door, and we did a lunch and learn up there recently, and it was like probably the most uncomfortable place that I can go to. You know what I mean? Like I go visit the prison sometimes, and it's way more comfortable in the pods in the prisons than it is at the Capitol. You know what I mean? Sometimes for me, because I could feel that like political energy, and you know what I mean, the divisiveness of actually what it is. You know what I mean? And I think for me, my intention is always about like, what is the message? You know what I mean? What is it that people believe about what's going on in their culture and their society, and about like what's actually happening around them. So for me, the conversation was really about the message, and the only thing I can talk about from that is from the message the way I can see it. Not if he did it or not, innocent, guilty. None of that is really my issue, really, in a lot of ways, right? Our country elected a president in the United States, and I actually come from a time when I feel like I'm getting old, because I can remember when there was Republican presidents and Democratic presidents. They talked to each other, and there was like a lot of communication that happened between them, and there was like a mutual respect between political parties. There was like, it was really, I think everybody, at one point, it felt like political parties had, it was like we had the same goal.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just taking a different route to get to that same goal. And I think that's what it felt like we trusted in politics, is that like, okay, we could disagree on the road we take to get there, but we're really trying to get to the same place. And when we talked about in the last time about, a person had been through the legal system, then being able to be elected president of the United States, which, you know what I mean? Like, I believe in our democratic process. You know what I mean? I believe, like, if a vote's a vote and it's fair, like, this is where we're at, and I can accept the results of that. You know what I mean? Whatever, good or bad, because our country made, you know what I mean? Like a vote, I guess. You know what I mean? That's what I got to believe in, right? So I also got to believe in, if that democratic process is the same, that our country will be able to look at this and go, okay, you know what I mean? Like, good or bad. The fact of the matter is, somebody that has been convicted of crimes is now the president of the United States. And I look at, actually, the crimes that he was convicted of, right? And he was convicted because he gave hush money to Stormy Daniels, I think her name was, right? And he gave that money to Michael Cohen, his personal attorney, to handle the situation for him. And he actually gave him about $400,000, and he gave it to him in the form of wages for employment, so he could avoid the tax on that and kind of cover that money up. And then he also gave him, I think it was he gave her, I think, only $150,000 or something like that. What was interesting is that Michael Cohen had gotten $400,000, and I think, like I said, she only got $150,000, and it was like he pays more for the cover up. You know what I'm saying? Than what to the person that he, you know what I mean, sort of victimized in a lot of ways, right? So that like thing right there is not like, it doesn't appear to be sort of political to me. Like I can look at that and go like, that's not actually a political issue, right? In my mind, I look at it and go, that's not a political thing. Just like I'm not looking at the message of him being a felon. That's not necessarily political to me. You know what I'm saying? If it was a Democrat that was been convicted of a crime and they were president, I'd probably be saying the same thing. So what does that mean for us now?
Yeah.
Right? Because now we finally got somebody on top, but everybody's denying that he's actually been through our system. But that's not true. He did go through our system, and now he's been elected president, and he's had the opportunity to actually terminate the employment of anybody associated that prosecuted him. And then freed, he overturned 1,500 people implicated in the insurrection of our nation's capital. So there's a lot of it that's like, okay, man, so now if he has the ability to do that, right? And Michael Cohen was his like best friend. It'd be like, you know what I mean? Like we're best friends.
Yeah.
And he ends up like coming out and saying it wasn't just about that either. There was a lot going on. Like they were he also Michael Cohen lied to Congress about that's what he did time for lying to Congress, because Trump was about plans to put a Trump Tower in Moscow. That's actually why that was the original thing that started down that path for him. That's why he ended up in court around all that stuff. But like, none of that is actually, I don't actually care about any of that stuff, man. Like all I care about is like, what does this mean for me? I'm an American, man. It's like, what does this mean for me now? You know what I'm saying? But but it feels like for me that like I am actually more vulnerable in some ways, right? Because I look at what's actually at stake and the money that's involved with those privatized prisons, this and that, and the cuts. You know what I mean? Like you got to wonder like what the actual plan is. You know what I'm saying? Or what's actually going on. So, you know, I'll just say that it's really not necessarily a political issue for me. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, I wish I would have had the power to, because I felt like I was wrongfully convicted too. You know what I'm saying? I don't think I did it.
Yeah.
Right?
And I feel like I was wrongfully convicted too, not of the mistake I made,
Right,
but what the actual charges.
Stuff that had going on, but like, are you ever going to get the opportunity
To be president?
fire the judge that prosecuted you?
Yeah, and to free my homies that I know.
Right, everybody that's all my co-defendants, dog. You know what I'm saying? We're all out now. You know what I'm saying? We're all out.
And I think you bring up a good point, actually a bunch of good points. And I'll just say for me, it's not only is it not political, but what you have just described is 1,000% more than what I know about the specifics of what Trump was convicted of and all of the backstory, because I don't involve myself in really national politics at all unless it's around issues that my community face, right? And so here's a really interesting thing. My direct reply to some of the feedback that we've received is twofold. Number one, whether or not you believe Trump is guilty does not matter to me. I don't know if Trump is guilty. I have not.
I don't give
Yeah.
two. That's not the issue.
I have not dived into that information. I have 4 jobs and a daughter and a life, and I don't have time to actually comb the internet looking for all the specifics and the details about Trump's guilt or innocence. But what I do know is that Trump was found guilty in the United States court system, and that I have thousands of friends who have been found guilty of crimes in the United States court system, and their charges were also trumped up, if you believe that his were, and they are also not defined by the crimes that they committed, but they have pretty much no rights. And so my tension is that regardless of how you feel about Donald Trump's criminal convictions, that I have friends who should be able to vote for the president if your friend was able to become president. And so that's my tension, right? Is I don't understand how you separate their humanity from his. They went through the same court system, they went through the same court process, but many of them have no rights, and this person has literally all the rights and all the power, as you pointed out, to pardon his homies, right? To fire people that were involved in his prosecution, to have complete presidential immunity from any crimes committed before, during, or after his presidency, essentially, right? So we have given a felon and a criminal that, and like, those are not even labels that I believe in, but that's what our system uses. We've given him supreme power to do things, and the one thing that I'm wondering if he'll do is reinstate some of those rights and privileges to my friends and my family and my
I
community.
guess that's where I'm at, Brandon, is that, like, that's what I'm getting at, is like, can we get to a place where prison reform or the legal system is, because he himself has really talked about how the legal system was manipulated right then, right? Like that, like, you know what I mean? The story is that, like, the political system was able to be manipulated,
Yeah.
right? So that tells me that we have to close the gaps up so that innocent people aren't being convicted of crimes that they didn't commit.
Yeah. And on top of that, we have friends who currently are awaiting certifications, but because they're on probation,
They
they
can't get
can't
certified.
receive them, even though they've been proven that they.
And that's really where I'm at, is that, like, what is going to happen for us now? Because are these restrictions, and are the you know what I mean? Or the other opposite side of that is our country goes, okay, that was all bullshit. Like, these are all made up, but we have a problem with our criminal legal system right now, because, like, wrongfully men are being able to be politically prosecuted in the court of law.
And their political rights are being stripped from them as a result of that prosecution, as a result of the finding of the courts. And so again, I just always have to come back to, if a felon can be a president, then every felon in the United States, whether they're currently or formerly incarcerated, should be able to vote. And just a quick plug, shout out to the National Prison Debate League, who is staging debates between incarcerated communities and like elite college debate teams to talk about these actual topics, which are meaningful conversations. They're not just debates, right? They're not just like scholarly activities. These are the realities that our country has to confront, regardless of what side of the political spectrum you reside on, or whether you like or believe in Donald Trump as a human being, a politician, whatever. We have identified in the last year through our political process that our system is broken. I don't think anybody can deny that, no matter what
There's
side
no
you're
way
on.
that you can deny that, like, innocent men can be convicted of crimes.
Yes,
Because if you believe that he was not guilty of these crimes and he was convicted, then you also believe that the system can be manipulated.
100%. And for Trump supporters out there, I'm not one of you.
And they said, happen to any one of us.
It could happen.
And here's what you're saying is, like, a completely innocent man was convicted of a crime. It could happen to any one of us. I mean,
And that's the point that I want to make, is just to identify, I am not a Trump supporter. I'm also not a Republican. I'm also not a Democrat. I'm an independent. I make my decision up based on the issues and the topics. I don't vote along party lines. And although I do not have any respect for our current president, what I do know is that it's very possible that he's a victim of a broken system. So I want to fix the system for everybody. My issues with our president are more morals. They're more values, that our morals and our values don't align, right? But what I can identify is all of you supporters who are, in our comments and on our reels saying that this is a sham, his charges aren't real, whatever. I assume that maybe you're right. And I just want you to understand that I want my friends who also have trumped up charges that are fake and were found guilty and are sitting in prison right now to have their situation addressed and looked at. And the one thing I will say where we are going to have a fundamental disagreement to some of the comments that came on our pages is that I've seen people say, well, Trump's crimes are so much less worse than like people who use drugs and sell drugs. No, I don't think they are. Right? I have friends who use drugs.
Because like just the money. So let's just say the money that was involved. We're talking about $500,000.
Yeah. What is that? I can't even conceive of that.
I you know, when I was at the most of it, like there was no way I touched $500,000 at one time when I was, you know what I mean? When I was, so it's like it's hard to think that like this is like just some $500,000, man. Like it's you know, it's a lot of dough to just be like, this is just and it's really the issue is that like for me is that like if you've been convicted of this crime and it's about tax evasion and now you're controlling the taxes in the country, you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah, we've given you
the sales, those things, those are the things that don't, it's the message that I really wonder about, and not necessarily, I know, Brandon, you like to say you Trump supporters and stuff like that, but and that's cool because I support you, man, you know what I'm saying? I support, I don't, you know what I mean? This conversation to me isn't directly to a Trump supporter in particular, right? It's like, what does it say to us as individuals that like, if you've been impacted by the system or you're going to be impacted by the system or whatever that looks like, we can't like ignore it and go, fucking, this is a good system because we just know either an innocent man was found guilty or a guilty man was elected president. You know what I'm saying? Like there's two things that are simple, right?
It's super simple.
And so like when you boil it down to that point, like our system is really a scary place to me. It's not really, this isn't about Trump for me, right?
Yeah.
This is like you said about like you have people, you know, we live in Lewiston right now, and I look around the corner, like sitting in the building, you know, we're sitting in this building right now, and there's probably maybe 4 cannabis shops in this block, right? And there's also now people that are incarcerated for cultivating cannabis, right? And they're going to be there for a very, very long time. And now, but like that message is messed up to me too. You know what I'm saying? Like it's in the same vein as this. You know what I'm saying? It's like, how is this going to continue to happen? Well, the issue is that, and it really comes down for me, is to like you chase the dollar. Like, why is this actually happening? Because we chase the money around, right?
And you've got
Like, and there's also, if you do a Google search, one of the, you know one of the things that's already happened since so Biden also passed he was eliminating privatized prisons. What was one of the first things that happened since Trump's took office is that he reinstated privatized prisons, and they're all getting money off of that. The privatized prisons, they it's like not actually. You could actually do a quick Google search, and you can see how much stock that the Trump organization really has in the privatized prison system. And the first thing he did was open Guantanamo Bay, right? He's got money on the prison system, right? And he's got you know, a policy that rounds people up and puts them in prison, right? It's easy to see how we got here. If you take all the emotion out of it, and it all comes down to it, like, we're business. You know what I'm saying? This is a business, right? Like you talk about like Donald Trump and, you know, Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. These are businessmen, though. You know what I'm saying? These are like straight business people. They aren't politicians. I think that's what's appealing about them to some people, is they're not politicians. And I don't want politicians either, right? But like when you think about it, it's like we're gonna run it like a business, and like if we run it like a business, we're gonna chase the dollar down, right? We're gonna chase the dollar down, and if we're chasing the dollar down and we're invested in the captivity of human beings, we're gonna create more ways to trap people up. And so he doesn't want to fix it. Like if I'm in that situation, if my theory is correct, 'cause I could be completely wrong, right? I could be upside down on this, right? But like, that's what it looks like through a couple Google searches, right? It's like, doesn't seem to be any mistake in that this thing is about money, right?
Well, and isn't that one of the biggest ironies, right? And like, I just want to be really explicit in saying this too. Actually, let me address something you said first. Like, you are right. When I say Trump supporters, it's more talking about like the episode we recorded and some of the really like negative feedback. And like, I was called like a radical progressive, which in a lot of sections of our society, I am, right? And in some others, I'm not. But like, I just also want to point out that Democrats have failed our system horribly as well. Our country as a whole fails our conception of justice and
I'll tell you this. I mean, I'll just personally say I wouldn't have voted. I did not. I mean, I don't think Joe Biden was the right president.
100%. I agree with that.
Like,
I also
I also think that I also believe that they probably committed crimes as well. I think that it's all that's all part of the. It seems like that office has been struggling over the last few years in terms of like you know what I mean? Like the massive amount of cover-ups and drama that happens with the presidency.
And I'm a believer in the saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? And I think we see that in our political landscape, no matter who's in charge, no matter what party has a majority, and all these things, we see corruption. And like you said, you pointed out the business aspects of it. A lot of people, believe in the Trump and his administration because we need to run this country from like a business mindset because there's a lot of people suffering and poor.
But I also believe that we do in a lot of ways have to run like
I agree with that.
the money has to be there, right? And it has to be, that's actually true.
But with that being said, even though that's true, what I want to say very explicitly to like poor people, my friends and my community who's poor, big business runs off of the backs of oppressing poor people, right? And so we see this, take away the politics, take away the presidency, take away Trump. Look historically in our country, extremely rich people do things to become more rich, not to distribute their wealth, right? And if extremely rich people were concerned in distributing their wealth, we would understand that the top like 0.05% of wealth is like, or I'm sorry, like 99% of wealth is held by like 0.05% of people. It's actually probably even a more extreme statistic than that. And so the belief that like ultra rich and wealthy people are going to somehow run our country and do the right thing for us as poor people is just crazy. And we're seeing that, right? So that's kind of one of my things that's not political. It's really a quality of life issue. But if you're poor and you think that an extremely wealthy person is going to come in and save the day, I just hate to break it to you that like history shows that is not the case and that will never happen, right? So my whole issue is really more of it's like a moral compass thing, right? I believe that the country's moral compass, because of everything we're talking about with having a president who's a felon, should point in the direction of reforming our criminal legal system across the board, regardless of what your crimes are. Because another thing that we're not talking about that I think needs to be pointed out is what Trump was found guilty of versus many things that Trump has been accused of is also a big separation for us, right? He's been accused of other crimes that have not been sorted out in the criminal legal system. And so we've like a lot of people are saying like, oh, if you're a drug dealer or a sex offender or you hurt somebody, you're a violent person, then like you shouldn't have any rights. I'm like, well, Trump has been accused of some of those things. And granted, when you're wealthy and you're powerful, you can evade the system. And when you're broke and you have no resources, you cannot. So my thing is like what I want our listeners, regardless of Democrats, Republicans, independents, or some other party, like obscure party that I don't even know about, is like, I want you to believe in what's right for like humans, right? And I also want you to believe that people can transform and people can change. And there are certain, as our Constitution says, inalienable rights that you should not strip from people regardless of their experience in the criminal justice system. Specifically, if we can have a felon who's president, then all felons should have as many rights as possible restored to them and should not come out of prison and face barriers to basic human needs like political involvement, housing, food, jobs. Because if you can be the president, then why is there tens of millions of people that can't get a job and can't find housing? And you can say those people should lift them up by their bootstraps. Maybe you're right, but I think their bootstraps and Trump's bootstraps look a little bit differently, right? They're a little bit different than each other's. Trump's bootstraps, since he was born, are made of 24 karat gold. My friend's bootstraps are made of like frayed strings that are really hard to grab, right? So that's what my problem is I want everybody, even if your political beliefs are different than mine, even if you're a supporter of somebody I don't support, I want to sit with you at a table and tell you about some of my friends who are the best people that I know, who made a mistake when they were young, got in trouble, and have been languishing in prison for decades, and they deserve to come home, and they deserve to vote, and they deserve housing and food on their table, and like maybe they deserve to run for president one day, right? Even though you think their crimes are worse than the president's crimes, at the end of the day, our system delegates crime as crime, right? If you commit a crime and you're found to be a felon and you're poor, your experience is different. And that's just the truth of it. And so anybody who believes that poor people are not treated differently than rich people is choosing ignorance, right? And we have, again, like we said in our last episode, that has been proven. And so also, if Trump can pardon 1,500 people who were convicted of crimes and their crimes were proven, right, that they actively participated in an insurrection, and you're pardoning them because of your belief system, I'm saying there should be pathways for people that committed crimes that are not related to the insurrection to also have a pathway home to have their rights restored. Because that's the other thing we didn't mention. When you pardon somebody, their rights are restored. It's not just that you got them out of jail, their rights are restored. They can now vote. They can now run for public office. They can't be discriminated on housing and job applications because they don't have that criminal record anymore. But I know thousands of people who will never have that privilege unless our president and our people and this world we live in say our system is broken and we should actually address it. We should address the broken parts of it. And that's where I'm confused about the kind of the dissent, because I just want to make this clear for our listeners. We are not talking about Donald Trump. That is not the topic of conversation. We are talking about our broken criminal legal system, right? And using Donald Trump as an example that regardless of what you believe and where you fall on that spectrum, this system is broken. And he has, in some ways, right, wrong, or indifferent, proven to us that we have reforms that need to come down the pipeline. And I'm just waiting to see, are him and his rich friends actually going to make those reforms for me and my poor friends? And if they're not, then we know what the system is all about, right? That's really just the meat of this conversation. Not whether or not I like Donald Trump, not whether or not I'm Republican or Democrat. I just acknowledge, and I have since way before Trump ever ran for office, that our system is kind of fucked up, man. Like, we should change it because it's the right thing to do. That's it.
No, that's right.
And I encourage anybody who's listening, whether you agree with us or disagree with I mean, we both said that, like, I'm not really an overly political person, but like, I don't want to talk to you about whether Trump should be president or not. I want to talk to you about the fact that he is and what that next thing should be, right? I want to see 1,500 pardons a day from the Donald Trump administration for people that just don't need to be in prison or should have their rights restored. Because I know plenty of people who were addicted to drugs when they were 20, and now that they're 30, they're not addicted to drugs. They hold down good jobs. They're positive members of their community. And you know what? They still have all those barriers, right? That's who I want to see have rights restored. And so I just ask anybody, if our president can have all this power and these rights as a felon, why can't my friends? And I'm interested for you too, because like you in the work that you do, you're interacting with people every day with criminal records and seeing in real time the barriers that they're facing. And do you think that, most people who come through your doors, if we could just like eliminate some of those barriers, would probably have a better shot at like a productive and happy and, good life?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, of course.
So that's really what the conversation is about. Let's close some of these gaps, right, between rich and poor. And let's close some of these gaps between losing your rights and gaining your rights and having your rights taken away from you, and like transforming your life to be a positive member of society. I know too many people who are at that point where they have everything to offer this world and they just can't because they're a felon. I just don't agree with that, man. I don't agree with that at all. And we haven't even talked about like the other irony here is about diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? We haven't even talked about that. Like, the vast majority of people who don't have their rights are black and brown. And we also are sitting in a world where we can't even talk about those statistics and those realities anymore. So again, it seems to me like wealth and resources are being used to tell a different story than what's real, right? We can't talk about diversity, equity, or inclusion. And my question to anybody who agrees with those policies is, which one do you have a problem with? Do you have a problem with diversity? Do you have a problem with equity? Or do you have a problem with inclusion? Right? I'm just confused about people's stance on that. But the reality is, poor people who are affected by our criminal legal system are overwhelmingly black and brown. And we do not have a process for them to get their rights back. But a rich white man is president and has not lost any of his rights. It's very confusing, you know? I don't even know what to make of it. It's wild. But I'm just interested, like, any other thoughts that you have about specifically, like, the fact that we've got, and I know we're gonna get negative feedback on this episode too, and I think that's important to embrace the negative feedback to keep the conversation going. But, is there anything that you saw, that you just kinda sitting with, like, not understanding where it comes from and why people are so, hesitant to look at the reality of the actual conversation we're having?
Well, I think, for me, I think it's hard. The truth is a hard pill to swallow at times, and I think it's like, it becomes difficult to when you yeah, I don't know, it's difficult to, understand whether you're right or wrong, you know what I mean? It's like it's hard to think that you might be wrong about something, right? So, I just think it's just more a conversation for me. It's like for me, I just want to make it clear. It's really about the message, like
Mm.
that what is it going to do for us as people that have been impacted by the system, or is it going to do anything at all? And if it's not going to do anything at all, that's really what the conversation for me is about. Is like, why not now? You know what I mean, this is a great time
Yeah.
to make some changes.
It should be. It should be a great time to make some changes. And I think just kind of my concluding thought is, because you brought up the conversation around private prisons, right? And money. And I think, like, there's enough resources out there for people to, if you have the time to look, that, like, prison in this country is like two things, right? In one way, it's a suck on the economy because taxpayers are paying absorbent amounts of money to keep people in prison that we really don't need to keep there any longer. And number two, prison is a business, right? There's a lot of really wealthy people in our country who are making a shit ton of money off of incarceration,
I'll talk the
right?
stock market.
Yeah, and so my whole question to everybody, and this is a futuristic question, is if we see mass incarceration continue and we see private prisons open up and start to generate a ton of money for wealthy people again, and we see a lack of reform for our prison system and our legal system, but a bunch of people profiting off of it, then I just ask you to be open to the possibility that how we started this conversation is accurate, that the system is designed to keep poor people down and lift wealthy people up, right? Because if we don't see those reforms and we see a bunch of money come because things remain status quo as they are, then what other conclusions can we draw? It's not about crime. It's not about, right and wrong, because I think it's wrong for rich people to incarcerate poor people and make money off of the incarceration, regardless of, how we categorize crimes. I think at the end of the day, our system should focus on healing and should center transformation instead of paychecks, right? And so I guess that's just my last thought is, in the next 4 years, 10 years, 40 years, if we continue to see rich people with power expand our system and not reform it and make money off of it, then how can you hide from the fact that our system has always been about money, not about right and wrong? And so, I look forward to the comments in some weird way. I look forward to being called like a radical and a blind Democrat again, even though I'm not either of those things really. Because I think we have to keep this conversation going. And one thing Behind the Door is always dedicated to doing is having complex conversations, as long as they're based in truth and not in hate. So, if you think we're crazy, let us know that you think we're crazy. Just do it respectfully, and we will return your energy exactly the same way. We will respectfully agree to disagree and maybe even have a conversation with you about, where we're coming from versus where you're coming from. So Yeah. This has been another episode of Behind the Door, and I have a weird feeling that we'll continue to talk about these topics because it's what everybody's talking about. And, I think that they're very important. And I think our people are depending on us to be the voice for them when they don't have a voice. And that's something that we're also committed to. So, you know, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. And I think we look forward to the comments.